Good morning and welcome to Sunday Lyceum. I'm your pastor, Reverend Gregory P. Kent. We are honored to have a teacher who's been here a few years. The Reverend Dr. Don Zanghi, ordained minister, healer, medium, teacher, and he's going to teach us today on what his knowledge is on physical phenomena. So please welcome Dr. Don, Reverend Don Zanghi.
Thank you, Reverend Kent. How's everybody today?
Good.
Awesome, wonderful. And you folks over there in video land, welcome. The topic today is physical phenomena, physical mediumship. In mediumship, we have two types. We have mental mediumship, which most people are familiar with. You receive a message, or you get a reading, and it's for you. If I were to give a message, say to Ron, it's for him. I'm picking up psychically, mediumistically about him. If, for instance, symbolically, I see a book levitating, you might know what that means. Nobody else does. But on the other hand, if we're in a seance and a book actually levitates, everybody sees it. So physical phenomenon is objective. It's for everybody to experience at the same time. Mental mediumship has come about as a result of physical mediumship. Physical phenomena,
It's very strong.
okay, physical phenomena has been part of mankind since the beginning. It's part of who we are and what we do. But for us, it wasn't until the experiences of 1848, everybody knows the little story about the Fox family, and when spirit was manifesting so that everybody could hear. Mostly it was knocks, raps, and taps in the house. Other people could come and hear it. It wasn't subjective, it was objective. That was the dawning of a new dispensation for spirit world. What we have here is the spirit world interfacing with the physical world, this physical phenomenon. Why? Why do they do that? To get our attention. The proverbial hit us over the head with a 2x4 to get our attention. And so that spawned a whole number of generations of mediums who were known as physical mediums, who were able to project out from themselves a very dense, very special form of ectoplasm. All of this works by ectoplasm. Now, if you saw Ghostbusters and their take on ectoplasm, that's Hollywood. That's not the same. Yeah, that's not it. We all can do some level of ectoplasm, but back in the day, it was those few mediums, a very small percentage actually, that produced enough of the proper kind of ectoplasm that produced physical mediumship. And we're going to talk about the different phenomena about that. When you are going for physical mediumship, you have to set the conditions. The conditions have to be right so that the spirit world can work with this ectoplasm. The spirit chemists, they're called, who work with the ectoplasm to produce these different types of phenomena. Now, a little bit about ectoplasm. He said back in the day, it was the one medium who went into trance, produced a lot of this ectoplasm from the inside of the body. They say it came from the glands and organs of the body. However, that played havoc with the health of those mediums back in those days. One example would be many of the mediums, physical or mental mediums, really did take care of themselves. They didn't know what we know today. They They smoked cigarettes, they drank alcohol, they didn't exercise, they ate a lot of meat, which is a dense frequency. And so therefore, those who did do mediumship sometimes suffered a lot of health situations. Those who practiced physical mediumship really got sick. And recently we had one of our people die who admitted, I should have listened to you guys. It's a terrible toll on the physical body. Well, at some point, the spirit world pulled back on that level of physical mediumship for two reasons. One is they said no more parlor tricks. And they moved the energy from physical into healing, spiritual healing, and more emphasis on mental mediumship, readings and messages. The other reason they pulled back, and this is just part of our history, there was a lot of people that were faking it. And so they pulled it back. And for a long time, people I know who were physical mediums early in their life, oh no, don't do that anymore. We don't do that anymore. Spirit won't cooperate with us. Simply, you ask them, they say, can't do it, won't do it. So, physical mediumship took a back seat for a while. Let's talk about some types of the physical mediumship that we have. The first one I want to talk about is still practiced, but maybe not the same way it was, and that's table tipping. Back in the day, the physical medium would sit at the round wooden table, mostly, and the sitters would sit at the table, and the medium would go into trance and produce ectoplasm, and the table would do certain things. Well, no, the spirit world would create the situation where the table would do certain things. The table would tip, rotate, walk across the room, levitate. Later when we talk about raps and taps and knocks, in the table. And so you do what they did back in Rochester days. They created a way of communication. For instance, when I do table tipping, table, for instance, would tip for yes, not tip for no, if you ask a yes or no question. Also, sometimes the knocks will give you what you need to know. Today, when we don't have that type of medium, it's not the collective ectoplasm of the sitters at the table. Yes, you need the medium there to oversee things and to run the whole situation, but it's the collective energy of the people at the table that would do what we call table tipping. Many times there'll be things on the table that I call spirit toys. One of the things, of course, would be a spirit trumpet. Rolled piece of sheet metal, larger at one end, small at the other, like a megaphone. It seems that the spirit world can use that shape and their material to produce phenomena. Here's a smaller one. So if I have both of these on the table, oh boy, does the spirit world have a lot of fun with that. They can spin them, turn them, levitate them, and not too much today, but back in the day we had something called direct voice. It would levitate, go right around the room, right around the table, and the voice would come out. They would create, using ectoplasm, a voice box in the trumpet. Hopefully, whoever came to you, if you heard the voice, you will recognize it. Because it is tinged with the voice of the medium, too. It's the connection. So sometimes you would have just let me back up about the table tipping. There was one time some Cassadaga people had us over at their house over here in North City for a seance. And a number of well-known people that, for instance, some of here would remember them. And it was a big dining room table, light was, there was a chandelier, the light was flickering, that's another form. And this big table would be like this. And it started to tip up 45 degrees, big table. People at this end, it's like Warren and Jim Watson, you remember them? They would try to keep their hands, you gotta keep connection to the table. And it stayed like that. They ask you a question, if the answer was yes, it would go like this. The answer was no, it just stayed. Now, I was sitting at this end of the table, and the things on the table never rolled up into my lap, stayed on the table. That is a very strong sense of physical phenomena. There was one time when I lived in this end of the land, a big kitchen table. We moved it into a big living room, and again, some of the same people sitting around the table. This was on the table. Well, the energy got so strong, we at the table were singing when the saints go marching in, such a high energy. This levitated off the table. My table, my trumpet, in light that you could see. There's no bakery there. Levitated up, came in front of me. Of course, I had to do that, you know. And it levitated. This levitated, in my mind, I was still kind of young in the whole thing. If I ever see levitation, I know this is real. It's real. I thought the trumpet would come over and land on my head, but landed person across from me. That's okay too. So this is the types of things that can happen. Now sometimes you might have just what's known as a trumpet seance. A typical trumpet seance would be people sitting in a circle, put the trumpets in the middle of the circle, do your preparation by singing, raising the frequency, and sometimes those trumpets would dance or levitate, all the things I talked about. What else do we have? Slates.
Can I ask you something? I
Who's
have a
talking? Yes.
question. Does the group dynamic come into play when in a session like that? What if you have people who are very closed-minded in the group? Will things not happen?
If they're closed-minded, they're probably not in the circle.
Okay.
I have had somebody in a table seance who was kind of negative, and we didn't get the phenomena that we hoped for.
Okay, so you do have to have the group
Yeah.
dynamic.
But then again, I've seen people that kind of open-minded, not quite, and they said, this changed my whole life. Your whole life changes when you experience the physical. Of course, the mental can do it too. You get a message or a reading and change your whole life. But this is objective. You see it, you know it's real. There's a subject known as, so precipitation is the word I'm looking for. There's different forms of precipitation. Maybe some of you folks remember these when you were young. You might have had it in school. You take a piece of chalk, put it there, put this here, wrap it in black cloth. I'll talk about that a little bit. It concentrates ectoplasm. And if all things go well, when you open it up, there's a figure or a message drawn by the chalk. Obviously, this is rather obsolete. I don't think you still use a dial telephone or drive a Model T car, so this is not as well known. Also, I have to say, this form is easy to fake. In my younger days, I was a semi-professional magician, and this is one easy to fake. But it still sometimes used to happen and real. So what is the idea about precipitation? Thank you. Another form of precipitation is called silks. S-I-L-K-S. You get some silk material, and you have an open bottle of ink, and you cover it with the black cloth. And if all goes well, they will precipitate the essence of the chalk here, or the essence of the ink, and imprint on the silk material a face or a message. I've seen that. Another form is known as card writing. Get yourself a little basket, get some 3x5 cards, get some crayons or colored pencils, cover it, and if all goes well, later on the 3x5 cards there'll be a picture, an image, something. Again, these forms are not as popular as they used to be. Even the spirit world goes, oh, been there, done that. These things happen. Now, a very high level of precipitation that very few mediums in the past were able to do. The most popular were called the Bangs sisters. Right here, the Bangs. So I didn't create that name, that's the name, the Bangs sisters. They were able to get a canvas, put it on the easel, put the paints there, cover it. In a relatively short time, you get things like this. Everybody see that? See that? Portraits, paintings. This is the type of thing this whole book is full. Let's say this is in black and white for just for printing. It was done in color. Let's say this one is like this. Uncle George is in the picture. Well, they cover it back up, and later there's Uncle George. And also, it's been happening that some of these people, their expressions change. Maybe the head moves. Now you say, well, anybody could paint a portrait. Science looked at this and said there's no brush strokes. That the image on the canvas was a very fine powder, almost like you find on the wings of a butterfly. We're not capable of doing that, especially in a short period of time. So that's one called precipitation. They precipitate the essence of what you're working with, the paint, the crayons, the ink, and use it to produce phenomena. Any questions at this point?
What was the time period of Victorian era or
Oh,
Gilded Age?
This is probably 40s or 50s.
Oh, 40s or 50s.
When I was in Camp Lilydale for 2 weeks in 1998 up in New York, while I was there, another picture was, another painting was found. People rummage around in their basements and they find things. So yeah, so around that time period. Now the physical phenomena I've talked about up to this point that's kind of old was from the late 1800s right up until 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe in the 80s, when the spirit world started to phase it out. So you don't see this kind of work that much anymore. I'll get to the new level of physical phenomena in a little bit. Okay. There's something called, what do we call it? Transfiguration. One of my favorite things. Transfiguration, also known as overshadowing. In a typical spiritualist seance room, like ours at the back of the temple, one end of the room will be curtained off. Big curtains covering. That's called the spirit cabinet. And in an ideal situation, and I'll use me as an example, I would be the medium. I would go in, sit in a chair like this, close the curtains, I'm out here, you're out there, and I would have a cabinet attendant who would watch things for me so that nothing stupid happens in one way or the other. I would go into trance, and the reason for the cabinet is the same reason we cover these things. The small space concentrates the ectoplasm. Does that make sense? Concentrates it. When my attendant thought the time was right, he'd open the curtains, I'd be in trance. Remind me to talk about the red light. But we would use a red light so that people could see what's going on. The red light, white light, destroys ectoplasm. And more than a few mediums in trance have been seriously injured or killed when somebody turned the lights on. You don't do that. It snaps back like a big rubber band, produces a lot of havoc. But ectoplasm is okay with red light. You go to the zoo, you see the nocturnal animals in red light, they don't see it. And so, in the transfiguration or overshadowing, while I'm in trance, faces of spirit would overshadow my face, sometimes fast, sometimes it would stay there. And everyone would see it. That's why it's objective. It's not in a certain person's mind, they see it. Sometimes it's someone you know, sometimes it's a spirit guide, sometimes they're just passing through. In the high form of that form of seance, the medium might channel one of the spirits. Now, about a week before I did a seance like that, in a Thursday class, one of my students asked me about Atlantis. What do I know about Atlantis? I don't know nothing about Atlantis. But in that transfiguration seance, one of my spirit guides channeled through me, gave the whole lesson on Atlantis. Nobody recorded it, so I asked him to do it again in class the following week, and I went and he gave the same lecture, and that was recorded. If you ever see my seminar on Atlantis, I played the CD, that came through like that, but originally came through in the Transfiguration seance. There's others here that do Transfiguration also, not just me. We have something called, when I talked about direct voice, where the voice can come through the trumpet, we have something called independent voice. Where the voice just shows up as if there's speakers in the room, but there's no physical speakers in the room. I've experienced that, but what I did experience in my house in the land was music. The most incredible music. I've never heard anything like it. And my wife, she heard it. It's objective. It's not in my mind. It's there. Look all over the house. Kids are sleeping. They never get up. Nobody's playing the radio. Our house is fairly isolated. Nobody outside. No music outside. We're hearing this music. That's direct from the spirit, not through a trumpet. Now there's another one called apports. Apports are amazing. A-P-P-O-R-T, or S if you're plural. Apports. Maybe you've experienced this but don't know what it's called. An apport is when the spirit can dematerialize an object and move it through time or space and then materialize it again. You know, Star Trek kind of thing. Well, I've got two stories about that, and I don't have time for both. These two women come here for, come to Cassadaga a lot. Nice woman. Her name was Ann. And she would come to my classes, and I was teaching this, and she raised her hand and said, that happened to me. She lived here, I think she passed away now, but she lived in the land. She had her favorite pair of slippers. And these slippers were always in the same place, so when she needed them, she knew they were there. And one day, they weren't there. So where'd the slippers go? A couple hours later, her sister in California calls. Ann, why are your slippers here in my house?
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, I'll never forget that. Why does spirit, you know, you put your keys down, and then they're not there, I put them there. And 2 hours later, there they are. Spirit will do this to keep your attention. They don't want to be forgotten about. They will let you know we're here, and they'll play these little tricks, little games. I guess I have time to talk about this. I think I have it written here. I gotta talk about this later. We had here for a long time in camp, Gerda Slater, God love her, long-time spiritualist, long-time theosophist, very steeped in all things spiritual. And we were very good friends with her. One time she said, "Can we go down south? There's a church down there, a medium down there. I want to visit. We'll stay overnight and we'll drive back." So, okay, fine. So we drive down to the church, see the mediums, get our readings. At the time, Jen and I had an old Cadillac, two-door Cadillac yellow. Her to sit in the back seat. So we're coming back. She says, "Can we make a stop? There's a friend here. I want to see." Okay, fine. Now, some of you might remember Greta Slater. She always had on her shoulder a little pin, an angel pin. That angel pin represented her late husband, Eddie. That was Eddie as far as she was concerned. She never went anywhere without Eddie. Well, as we're coming back, we stop at the house. All of a sudden, that's missing. Oh, Curtis going, "I gotta have my Eddie. I gotta have my look for it." Retrace her steps out to the driveway, look in the car, on the seat, between the seat, under the seat, all over. I cannot find Eddie. Eddie, Gerda, I'll buy you a new little angel pin. No, I gotta have Eddie. Okay. We're leaving the house to come home. I open the car door. I move the seat, the front seat, so she can get in. And Eddie is sitting right smack dab in the middle of the seat that I would have seen if I had looked. That is an airport. Many times in the past, if something like this is on the table, or table tipping, airports will come flying out. Usually stones or crystals or jewelry. Gifts from spirit to let us know that it's real. Any questions at this point?
I'm sorry, I'm one asking
No, that's
questions.
okay, just so I can hear you.
I just want to make sure you have time to get into what you said physical phenomena is today.
Yes.
Okay.
You said something about a red light.
Okay, yeah, about ectoplasm. I did mention it. If you're going to work, the darker it is, the better for
Okay.
ectoplasm. Total darkness. But because people use that to fake it and fraud and hoax and everything, red light will not destroy ectoplasm. White light will. So you can see what's going on. Okay, let me talk first about I think the highest form of physical phenomena is materialization. When the materialization medium sits in the cabinet, and by using the ectoplasm, out from the cabinet walks people, spirit people who are now just as solid as this. Many times you know the people, so it can't be fake. Or a 7-foot Indian comes out. Or your grandmother with her little puppy. You don't fake that. Sometimes the materialized form indicates no touch. Sometimes they say, "Let's touch and let's talk." I've often said I would travel and I would pay to see that. The one time I traveled and paid and it was not. That form is very, very rare. Those are the materialization mediums that no longer do because of everything that I said. That's not all. Let's see if there's a little more. No, there is etherealization. Just like you see in the movies, the form is there, but it's not fully formed. You can see through it. Maybe it's just the head, maybe it's just the torso. It's more ghost type, which is a bad term, but you know what I mean? No. The experiences of Gerda Slater, she used to keep notes of all the hundreds of seances she's been in. And she said, "Oh, so gotta write a book. Well, finally my wife said, "We'll write the book." I walked with spirits. Gerda Slater's proof of life after death. My wife writing as Gerda Slater, taken right directly from the notes. Gerda was saying, well, there was 30 people in the room, and everybody had 10 people come out of it. I mean, come on, I want to see one. But Gerda's experiences are in that book. There are a number of books up here. I don't have time to show them all. Maybe later you can take a look at them. So where is physical phenomena today? Earlier you mentioned some of the electronic things. We have something called EVP, electronic voice phenomena. If you watch these guys on TV with the little recorder, is anybody here? Is anybody here? I've got archival material. I haven't done it in a long time. I had a seminar on this. Voices, clear voices like this voice, being recorded on tape recorder, coming over on radio, coming over on television, phone calls from the so-called dead. I've got an amazing collection of some of those. Even that, we've moved down beyond that. We now have technology. I used to talk to Don Medley, some others here, the Spirit Box. Spirit talk to you in real time. I did, it's also called, let's see, transcommunication, EVP, electronic voice phenomena, same thing. Once an EV conference in Reno, Nevada a number of years ago, and a Spanish woman, Portugal, was getting directions from the spirit world to set up certain types of radios in certain positions to get their frequencies right. Talking in real time, back and forth, just like you talking to me and me talking to you. Spirit photography. Some people claim the orbs are spirits. No one's been able to prove that. But it is something phenomenal. It is something real. I think the day will come when the orbs themselves will tell us what their true nature is. But there is spirit photography, a nice collection of spirits on film. And it's not always digital like it is today. Sometimes the old 35 millimeter will capture them just as well. So the spirit world is very interested in moving forward. Again, they're not interested any more than you're interested in driving an old car or using an old telephone or telegraph. We move on, they move on. Now, are there any questions?
Don, what about spoon bending?
Spoon bending is that's psychic. That's psychic energy that you channel into the spoon. Now I have a story about that. Brian O'Leary, Dr. Brian O'Leary, he passed away a few years ago. He was a NASA astronaut. He was the one in charge of the Mars mission. He was supposed to be the first person to fly to Mars. Can you imagine that? Then they cut the program. He ended up living in Hawaii. He was a dyed-in-the-wool doctor, physics, Princeton University, straight science, until he started discovering metaphysics. And he started traveling, looking at the different things, travel to India, travel to South America, see people who do some wonderful things. And so he became now a out of the closet metaphysical person. His book, and especially his video called The Second Coming of Science, covers all of this. Well, I was at a conference where he was. And when many of these conferences, then the different presenters break up in little groups, you can go to them. So I signed up with him. And he was going to do a spoon bending presentation. He called Spoon Bending 101. And I need a volunteer, so I raise my hand and I go up. And he and I did spoon bending. I still have his spoon and my spoon at home. It's harnessing the spirit. Again, being an astronaut, when that window opens, like they talk at NASA, at the Cape, when that window opens, you can bend the spoon. I don't know if I call that physical phenomenon. Why not? We'll call it physical phenomenon. But it's you doing it. It doesn't come from here, it comes from here. It comes from the solar plexus. Again, focus the mind, get the breathing, then you go like this. Bend, bend, bend. Everybody's yelling, bend, bend, bend. It's just like it's rubber. Yeah, I still have those spoons. I think the work of spirit is continuing in the spirit world, and we're going to benefit from it when we are ready. Now let's just finish up by saying, one year I was a preacher medium at Temple Heights Spiritual Camp in Maine. And I happened to be the last week before they were getting ready to close up for the season. I mean, it's Maine, it's going to snow any minute now, man. And so I gave the Sunday talk, and the talk closed up to go home. Well, before the talk, I'm thinking, what am I talking about? What am I talking about? Spirit, because I will tell you what to talk about. And they projected to me what the future could hold in spiritualism if we allow it. Phenomena that was just unbelievable for them to tell me about. Rooms made of crystal. And technology in the middle of the room like laser. Remember Star Wars, Princess Leia shows up like a little hologram? That's what we're going to give you when you're ready. But instead of Princess Leia, it's going to be your grandma. Rooms built where the voice phenomena comes right out of the walls in real time. All the implants. There's an implant in your ears that would pick up the frequency of spirit. Implants in your eyes, so you'll be able to see into the astral plane. Sometime a few years ago, I think Google or somebody was coming up with glasses very similar to that, very primitive form of that. But remember, these people in the spirit world were working on this when they were here. Everybody from Edison to Einstein, Tesla, and their groups are working on this for us. We have to be open to it and allow it to happen.
So Don, wasn't that the Philadelphia experiment where they transported the ship to 1983, or is that out?
The Philadelphia experiment, Ed Bielek.
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing, Ed Bielek is showing up on Google now about the man who traveled in time to year 2765. I was thought if Ed Bielek ever passed away, the whole world would end. He's in a whole different time thing. I have a picture, I met Ed Bielek.
Me too.
Yeah, he's a very interesting person. That's a high level of technology to make that battleship literally disappear and be transported. It's another form of it. If you can transport a coin or slippers, then why not a battleship? There's a movie called The Philadelphia Experiment that is accurate to what supposedly happened. Of course, they got to put the love story in it. If you want want to know that, just Google, and you'll find the Philadelphia Experiment, all government stuff. Spiritualists should have the corner on this. We should corner the market on this, but now everybody's brother and sister is doing some aspect of all types of mental and physical phenomena, not necessarily just spiritualists. That's why they told me in Maine, Spirit said, if we allow it to happen, if we're open to it, much of it I don't think I'm going to see in my lifetime, but who knows? They told me so much more. One thing they said about spiritualism in general, the whole idea of spiritualism as church will disappear, and it's going to be held like ours in temples, lodges, and auditoriums. I think the stigma of church that some people have. Any last minute questions? Because I know we're going to close pretty soon.
Any more questions for Don? Yes, ma'am.
Do you teach classes here yourself?
Right now, I'm teaching spiritual teachings on Thursday evenings.
What
Yes.
time? What
Well,
time?
you'd have to ask him. Ask him. Ask her.
7 to 9.
Ask her.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the way out, maybe we get one of our flyers.
A lot of flyers are out in the Welcome Center. Everything that's going on right now are flyers.
Yeah.
Or our website also has what's going on. Anything else for Reverend Don? Thank you for coming today. We appreciate it. Those who are watching virtually,
People on Facebook, thank you for being here.
Facebook and YouTube, and we'll see everyone next week. Thank you.
Thank you.